The people in charge of Fukushima Daiichi have learned some of their challenges may be more difficult than they thought. They're looking into unresolved problems at the nuclear plant. What they've found has changed their understanding of what's happening inside. 2 years ago, members of a government panel released their final report on the accident. It said a worker manually stopped the emergency cooling system for Reactor 3 early on March 13th, 2 days after the disaster. But the latest findings from Tokyo Electric Power Company show the cooling system had already stopped functioning more than 6 hours before. The findings suggest fuel rods started melting earlier than TEPCO officials believed, and more melted fuel would have dropped to the bottom of the containment vessel. That makes the removal of the fuel more difficult than expected. TEPCO officials also found more problems. After the accident, crews used fire engines to inject water into Reactor 2, but the water may have reacted with the fuel inside to produce hydrogen, raising the temperature significantly. That sped up the meltdown.
The Zendai plant operator has worked to meet the new standards. It spent nearly $1.3 billion on infrastructure to prepare for tsunamis and earthquakes. The plant's reactors are to be cooled with seawater pumps and surrounded by a 10-meter-high protective barrier. The height is based on the largest tsunami ever to hit the region. The operator also plans to build a 3-meter-high embankment. Key facilities are to be reinforced after raising the estimate of the most powerful earthquake possible in the region. Emergency power supply vehicles and pump trucks have been deployed on high ground to respond to accidents like that in Fukushima. The operator says the cooling of reactors can continue even if cooling facilities malfunction.
Infrastructure is, of course, in place on multiple levels. This is part of the regulatory standards, so the company is taking appropriate measures.
But serious accidents that cannot be addressed by only reinforcing infrastructure are possible. The standards call for improving the ability of personnel to respond to the unknown. Kyushu Electric has a detailed manual explaining what actions its workers should take.
Basically, the manual is properly organized, so we just need to confirm everything is done according to procedure.
The firm says it can cope with emergencies by following the manual. NHK asked to observe one of the firm's on-site drills, but was refused. Shikoku Electric Power Company allowed coverage of a drill at its Ikata plant, which is also under screening. The drill was based on a scenario involving a loss of power. The workers acted according to the company manual. Emergency devices are operated manually, so the manual includes specific instructions, such as how to remove bolts.
Remove the stoppage plate.
There are more than 2,000 pages of such procedures. Learning them takes time.
Preparing manuals is one of the most important tasks for carrying out complex accident responses simultaneously and without errors.
But some say learning the manuals is not enough. Akinori Komatsubara studies accident causes from the viewpoint of human factors. He places significance on what happened in Fukushima. The plant chief was worried that the flow of water to the reactors would stop and decided to deploy fire trucks. But that was not in the manual, and no one could take quick action. This was one reason for the delay in cooling the reactors.
It's not okay to simply follow the manual. When action cannot be taken based on it, workers have to think on their own about what to do based on the standard in the manual.
In the event of an unforeseeable development, the head of the power plant would be entrusted to make key decisions. The former chief of Fukushima Daiichi, the late Masao Yoshida, had to address the nuclear accident despite lacking much information. He told the government panel investigating the nuclear accident that he lost the ability to comprehensively grasp key information after the unprecedented accident. How is it possible to make sure that plant chiefs make the best decisions? Kyushu Electric told NHK its personnel are taking part in a training program of a group of power companies. We obtained footage of the first session of such training, organized by the group in February. All the heads of power plants across Japan took part. Their instructor was a former senior official of the Tokyo Fire Department who responded to the Fukushima accident. He said that whereas firefighters acquire daily on-the-job experience, most nuclear plant chiefs do not experience serious accidents, making it hard for them to learn how to respond.
Sadly, it's impossible for you to train yourselves to exercise leadership on the job. I hate to say it, but you have a long way to go.
Participants also expressed anxiety.
Plant chiefs would have to decide how to create teams to address deteriorating situations at power plants in the event of accidents. Extremely difficult decisions would have to be made.
The organizers are now creating a more practical training program. Members are visiting the Maritime Self-Defense Force and other outside experts to gain knowledge. On this day, they observed a drill for a massive earthquake. No measures have been created to guarantee enhancement of the ability to respond to crises.
My gut feeling is that we still have a long way to go. That makes it even more important for all those involved in nuclear power to share a sense of crisis.
茨城県東海村にある東海第二原発で事故が起きた際の住民の避難先の案を茨城県が発表しました。避難の対象となる東海第二原発の半径30キロ圏内には全国の原発の中で最も多いおよそ100万人が暮らしています。茨城県は事故が起きた際に避難する住民の受け入れ先や人数について県外の自治体と協議を進めてきました。今日発表された案ではおよそ52万人の住民は隣接する栃木県など県外の5つの自治体に避難し、 およそ44万人は県内の他の自治体に避難するとしています。茨城県は今後、避難先となる自治体との協議を本格化させ、今年度内に具体的な広域避難計画を策定したいとしています。
Every year, people from all walks of life gather in Hiroshima to remember and reflect. They attend a memorial marking the day an atomic bomb left the city in ruin. More than 290,000 people died, either in 1945 or the years since. NHK World's Takafumi Terui shows us how their legacy and message are being honored.
Rain poured down on Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. Still, people came. The survivors, the hibakusha, were among them.
When I look back at what happened, I just can't hold back my tears. I keep thinking, why? Why?
I came here to pass on the horrors of war and memories of the bombing to my children's generation.
And that's why many others gathered here too. By the time the ceremony started, about 45,000 people had packed into the park. U.S. Ambassador Caroline Kennedy was among the representatives from 68 countries. At 8:15 a.m., participants observed a moment of silence to mark the time the bomb was dropped. The ceremony comes weeks after the Japanese government changed its security policy. Cabinet members reinterpreted the constitution to allow Japan to exercise its rights to collective self-defense, so it could help a closely related country under attack. Hiroshima Mayor Kazumi Matsui alluded to the change in his speech.
The Japanese government should accept the full weight of the fact that we have avoided war for 69 years, thanks to the noble pacifism of the Japanese Constitution.
Matsui called on leaders around the world not to use what he labeled the inhumane threat of the absolute evil to defend their countries. And Prime Minister Shinzo Abe echoed his words.
We have the responsibility to ensure that we rid the world of nuclear arms.
Every year, people from abroad travel to Hiroshima to take part in the ceremony and to better understand the true impact of the bombing.
This is history, but it's also present. So it's important to see and to transmit to the future.
I'm so thankful that I was able to make this trip. I'm more serious than ever of working for peace.
The memorial ceremony concluded, as it has since the late 1940s, with local choirs performing the Hiroshima Peace Song. People in Hiroshima also mark this day with seminars and rallies. It's part of the effort to keep the memories of August 6, 1945 alive. And it's part of a decades-long campaign to make sure what happened here never happens again. Takafumi Terui, NHK World, Hiroshima.
Now let's take a look at some of the events leading up to when nuclear bombs were used for the first time in history.
In 1931, troops from Japan invaded China to secure territory and resources. They expanded their occupation of the country over the next decade. In 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, an American base in Hawaii, and invaded the British-occupied Malay Peninsula at the same time. The Pacific War began. In 1942, American scientists started a secret 3-year-long project to develop nuclear weapons. On August 6, 1945, a U.S. B-29 bomber took off from an island in the Pacific. The crew dropped an atomic bomb over Hiroshima. It exploded at 8:15 a.m. 3 days later, another American warplane dropped a nuclear bomb on Nagasaki. The blast and heat rays devastated the cities. The attacks and the radioactive fallout killed more than 200,000 people by the end of 1945. Six days after the bombing of Nagasaki, the Emperor of Japan went on the radio to announce his country's surrender.
We have used it in order to shorten the agony of war, in order to save the lives of thousands and thousands of young Americans.
In the years after the war, up until now, tens of thousands of people have suffered from the effects of radiation exposure. They come together with many others every year to take part in memorial ceremonies. Their message is simple: never again. People in Hiroshima and Nagasaki continue to call for the abolishment of nuclear weapons and a world without war.
People pay respects to the victims of the bombing and their families throughout the day in Hiroshima. More from NHK World's Miki Yamamoto.
Light and shadows danced on the exterior of the atomic bomb dome. This former industrial promotion hall has stood here for 69 years as a reminder of the raw power of nuclear weapons. Many people have gathered on the banks of Motoyasu River. Every year, Hiroshima residents and visitors mark this day by floating lanterns on the water. People will float more than 8,000 lanterns. They write messages on each of them. Some call for peace, others note how every life is precious. Organizers say it's an important occasion to wish for a world free of war and nuclear weapons. A survivor of the bombing is with us here. Keiko Ogura, thanks for joining us. Ms. Ogura has taught herself English so that she can tell foreigners about her personal experience and guide them around Hiroshima. First, could you explain the meaning of lantern tradition?
Yes, lantern floating is a Japanese custom to comfort the souls of the dead people. But in Hiroshima, it had an additional meaning. People here write messages on lanterns praying for world peace.
Okay, so what compelled you to tell your stories in English?
Using English, I can share my experience directly with people from around the world. Without the interpretation, I save time and listen to what they think about. For example, many visitors from the States ask me, do people in Hiroshima still hate us? Or do able survivors want us to apologize? I tell them, no, we don't hate them. We want Americans to come to Hiroshima and learn what happened to the people here. Nuclear weapons are so powerful and fearful. So revenge or hatred is meaningless.
Well, overcoming hatred and joining hands is probably your point. But after 69 years, what is the biggest message you want to convey? Is there anything you're worried about?
Now the average age of survivors is 79, and the survivors are dying day by day. they have died wishing no one will experience such a tragedy. But in the world, there are still so many nuclear weapons. So I want young people around the world to come to Hiroshima as soon as possible. And after listening to our survivors' stories, take any action, spread Hiroshima's wish to the world.
What kind of actions?
And please tell our stories to your families and friends. Or if you are good at writing books or drawing pictures, do anything you can.
Keiko Ogura, thanks for joining your thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, I spoke with many people in Hiroshima, and many felt the same way as Keiko Ogura, that time is running out. Survivors are trying to tell their stories of horror and perseverance, but they're getting older. Many are diagnosed with cancer. Thousands die every year. So the pressing issue is how to make sure that their memories don't die with them. Reporting from Hiroshima, I'm Miki Yamamoto.
Prime Minister Abe met people from Hibakusha groups in Hiroshima. He said he will continue to explain why his cabinet decided to allow Japan to exercise its right to collective self-defense. Abe met 7 representatives of atomic bombing survivors groups. They urged the Prime Minister to rescind the cabinet decision.
A promise is engraved on the cenotaph in Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. It says, "Let all the souls here rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the evil." The cabinet decision breaches that promise and could result in Japan repeating its mistakes. We demand the decision be rescinded.
Abe replied that the sole purpose of the cabinet decision is to protect the peaceful life of the Japanese people in the increasingly severe security situation.
I'd like to stress that Japan's posture as a peace-loving nation will never change, and it will not become a country that wages war.
Abe said he will work to gain public understanding of his position.
2 Japanese cities, 2 atomic bombings that changed history. Tens of thousands of people died in an instant in August 1945. Survivors were left suffering in the ruins. Newsline will show you how they've been passing down their experiences and sharing messages about world peace. Join us for our special coverage, remembering Hiroshima and Nagasaki, through Saturday, August 9th.
Years ago today, at 8:15 in the morning, the U.S. dropped the world's first atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. Destruction from the bomb was massive. Shockwaves, radiation, and heat rays took the lives of some 140,000 people, nearly half of the town's population. 3 days later, the U.S. dropped a second atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Nagasaki, killing another 74,000.
Earlier this year, Democracy Now! Traveled to Hiroshima. We visited the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park, and among others, I interviewed a survivor of the blast named Koji Hosokawa. We spoke next to the A-bomb dome, one of the few structures in Hiroshima that survived the blast. I began by asking him where he was at the time the atomic bomb fell.
I was at 1.3 kilometers away to the northeast from this area. I was exposed to the bomb there. And there was a building which was a very stout building. And so miraculously I survived.
How old were you?
何歳でしたか? 17 years old.
What were you doing in that building?
建物の中で何をされてましたか? I have to explain about it. And around the end of World War II, men throughout Japan were drafted and sent to battlefields. Adult men. So there was a labor shortage. So in order to have some people working in various places, 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds or older than these students were mobilized and worked at various places, so they could not work. I mean, they could not study, and so I was one of the mobilized students. And I was working at that building that was a communication bureau, and today it is now NTT telephone company. And people thought the imminent landing of the U.S. forces, or Allied forces, and I was there in order to have some communication lines established. And so I miraculously survived. But my sister, younger sister, she was also mobilized to work at some place. And she was at 700 to 800 meters away from the hypocenter, very close to the hypocenter, and she was exposed to the bomb there. And she was with teacher and the students, the other students. And in all, 228 people were there together with her, and all of them were exposed to the bomb. And my biggest sorrow in my life is that my younger sister died in the atomic bomb.
On that day, on August 6th?
Yes, she died on that day. But many cases, the relatives or family members could not find their children's bodies even. But in my sister's case, fortunately, she was carried to a relief station outside Hiroshima City, and she could receive some care, and she died there. Many people were missing, but I thought it was very fortunate that we could have her body. So at that time, that was a fortunate case.
How old was she?
彼女は何歳でしたか? 13 years old. She became 13 very recently at that time.
She died of radiation sickness after, or the actual effects of the blast on August 6th?
8月6日の放射能のために亡くなったんですか、それともやはり熱線などの原爆によって亡くなったんですか？
原爆ということは我々は全く知らされておりませんし、
we didn't know it was an atomic bomb. Nobody knew it was an atomic bomb.
だから私はそんな至近距離で被爆しながらもしばらくその近くに留まってたんです。
I was around this area because I didn't know about the bomb, so I was very close to the hypocenter, but I stayed around that area.
当時の日本人は原爆なんてことは全く知りませんでした。
knew nothing about atomic bomb.
知っておれば
If I had known that,
すぐに
I
爆
would
心地から
have
遠い方に
fled
逃げたに違いありませんから。
from the city to as far as possible.
Where were your parents?
両親はどちらにいらっしゃいましたか、細川さんの。
その時は郊外におりまして。
They were outside Hiroshima.
それは宮島におりました。
宮島 Do you know? 島ですね。宮島アイランド。
だから家の方は大丈夫だったです。
So the house was okay.
How did they find you?
どうやって細川さんを両親は見つけられましたか？
いや、私は歩いてその後の日歩いて帰りました。
The next day I walked all the way home.
何もなくなっている焦土と化した広島の廃墟の中を歩いて帰りました。
Out city, walked through the city.
What did your parents say when they saw you?
両親が細川さんが帰ってこられたのを見てどのようにおっしゃいましたか？
それは両親というては母親は修行所に迎えに行っておりまして留守でしたからね。しばらくするうちに妹は棺に入って帰ってきました。
My mother was away to the relief station, and So soon after that, my sister came home in a coffin. She was burnt all over her body. But fortunately, her face was okay. She was almost naked. Aside from her face, she was almost naked, and almost all her body was burnt.
今のは広島では誰もが体験したごく普通の出来事に過ぎないんです。
This is only one of the cases, just one case of many people experienced a similar situation.
This is almost 69 years later.
69年経ちました。
It was the United States that dropped the atomic bomb. How do you feel when Americans come here to Hiroshima?
広島に来るときにはどのような気持ちがされますか？
これはアメリカ人より私はやっぱり戦争を憎みます。
I hate war, rather than the people of the United States. I hate war.
戦争は人々を皆クレイジーにします。
Makes everyone crazy.
何も関係のない人も殺してしまうわけです。
So in the war, innocent people are killed.
その究極が僕は原爆だろうと思うんです。
And the ultimate case, I believe, is a bombing.
Mr. Hosokawa, as a hibakusha, as a bomb survivor, do you feel the United States should apologize for dropping the atomic bomb on your city?
広島に原爆投下したことに対して。
やはり原爆は広島と長崎に落とされましたけれども、私は広島と長崎ではなく人類全体に落としたものだと私は思います。
Atomic bombs were dropped not just on our cities, but on the whole human beings.
だから私は私の被爆体験を話すことはいろいろありますけども。
I have many things to talk about my experience of the A bomb.
だから次の3発目が落とされた時にはもう地球はなくなるという話を。
Then the Earth will be annihilated.
例を挙げながら分かっていただきたい。
I want people to understand this is going to be, the Earth is going to be annihilated. So whenever I talk, I want them to understand this.
この平和公園は
The Peace Memorial Park,
投下されるまでは人々の暮らしがあったんです。
people lived here.
全部廃墟になりました。
Everything was
そこに住んでた人は全部が亡くなりました。
Everyone died around this area.
この平和公園は今こんなに綺麗な木がたくさん生えてるんですけども、これは後から小さな苗木を植えたのが何十年も経ってこんなに大きくなったんです。
Later they planted small trees, and after decades these trees became bigger, and now a very beautiful park today.
そんな例を挙げながら私は話しております。
I tell the visitors about this too.
人々の暮らしがあったということ。
I want them to understand people lived here.
これはぜひお伝えください。
Please tell the people that people used to live here.
戦争はまさにクレイジーに。
War makes everyone crazy.
Hiroshima survivor Koji Hosokawa. He was speaking at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. His 13-year-old sister's diary has been published as a book. It's called Yoko's Diary, The Life of a Young Girl in Hiroshima During World War II. Special thanks to Naoko Koizumi for translating our interview and Makiko Nakano of Democracy Now! Japan, as well as John Hamilton and Dennis Moynihan.